Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, first it was Algeria, now Sudan, how women led the protest movement against the Sudanese president. Also, the race for the White House is already underway with a record number of women on the Democratic side putting their hands up. But how are they being treated by the media? We'll be putting the question to Doris Truong from America's Poynter Institute for Media Studies. And the revolution underway in the Australian Outback, how two women are determined to become rodeo champions. But we begin in Sudan, which has just witnessed the toppling of its President Omar al-Bashir. This after the country had faced growing protests since last December, sparked by a sharp hike in the price of bread. Since then, tens of thousands of people across the country took to the streets to call for an end to Bashir's autocratic regime. And in what's becoming an increasing trend, more and more of them were women.
Her name is Ala Salah. This young woman from Sudan became an overnight sensation as she led anti-government protesters in a chant in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. This photo of Ala, posted to Twitter, has gone viral the world over. Some see it as the defining image of the key role women have played in the uprising that toppled President Omar al-Bashir after some 30 years in power. But women's involvement in protests in Sudan isn't new. In a tweet, Ala said, "Sudanese women have always participated in revolutions in this country. If you see Sudan's history, all our queens have led the state. It's part of our heritage." The protests erupted in December over a rise in the cost of living. The movement ballooned into calls for Bashir to step down, with hundreds of thousands taking to the streets across the country. And it's estimated that nearly 70% of them were female, according to media reports.
I think that the breaking point that this system in Sudan, the political system, has failed. It's a dysfunctional system with poor governance. And there has been a lot of violence against women, detention. Women have been subjected to rape, to killing, to displacement.
Sudanese women are subject to the Sharia-based so-called Public Order Act, passed by the Bashir government. Under the law, women must follow a strict dress code, which requires headscarves and bans pants. The law also forbids women from being alone with a man that is not a relative. Rashida is a Sudanese refugee in France. She was arrested in Sudan in 2012 when police stormed a meeting with fellow feminist activists.
They threatened to kill us and our families. They threatened to spread fake, indecent photos and videos of us that would have tarnished our image. Then they took my phone and computer away. They beat us with so much hatred. I couldn't understand why this was happening.
The movement that ousted Bashir has showcased female empowerment. But women still face an uphill battle as the country enters a 2-year transition period overseen by the military.
Now to the United States, where increasingly attention is turning to who's putting their hand up to be a presidential candidate. Hillary Clinton's dramatic loss in 2016 has certainly inspired many women to throw their hat into the ring on the Democratic front. Elizabeth Warren is the first woman to announce a bid for the 2020 Democratic nomination, followed by fellow Senators Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar and Kamala Harris. But what sort of treatment can female candidates this time around expect from the media? Joining me now is Doris Truong, the head of diversity and training at the Poynter Institute for Media Studies in St. Petersburg in Florida. Doris, thanks for your time. Research carried out by the Northeastern University's Journalism School has revealed that women on the 2020 campaign trail are already being treated in a harsher fashion than their male peers. So why is this happening?
So I think one of the things that's happening is that there's kind of an ingrained way that U.S. journalists think about women versus men. And this also stretches to the business world because politics is a business in and of itself, right? When you think about how a man can be considered assertive as a positive trait, that same woman can be considered aggressive. A man can be passionate about what he is trying to get across as a point, and that same woman would be described as shrill in a similar situation. So we're sort of seeing that play out in the way that stories are being told about these candidates. We see that people are referring to the families of the women a lot more than they necessarily delve into the families of the men. But one of the other things is that a lot of these women are not necessarily well known on the national stage. And so I think that that's where the media falls into these tropes of how do we profile someone that no one has ever met before.
And certainly from this side of the Atlantic, we're hearing a lot more about Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, Peter Buttigieg, rather than Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren, yet alone their policies. So what impact does this have on the voter?
Well, I think that we're still, as a country, kind of recovering from 2015, when there were almost as many candidates who had declared by this time in the election cycle. So as of Tuesday, there were 20 people who had declared for the Democratic, who had said that they were going to run from the Democratic Party, and 6 of those are women, as you had mentioned. So we've got this saturation of the field when the presidential campaigning has not really started in earnest yet. And I think that people are trying to lean on names or stories that might resonate with their readers. So when they're seeing that people are interested in those stories about Mayor Pete, then they're going to be running more stories about Mayor Pete. They're going to be using that coverage of him. He's very media friendly. He has lots of interesting sound bites. You may know that people in the United States were fascinated by him being able to speak fluently in Norwegian. And that's partially because a lot of Americans speak only one language. So there's that story that's very compelling.
But what impact is this going to have on the voter in the long term?
I think in the long term, the voter has to be somewhat more responsible for themselves and trying to find information that they can look at all different sides of how that candidate is being portrayed, because you're going to see that same story over and over again. One of the stories about Amy Klobuchar, who's one of the candidates, is that she had berated her staff and had gone so far as to eat a salad with a comb. And that's something that just really resonated with people because it was such an unusual anecdote. And it doesn't really speak to what kind of a legislator she would be or what kind of a presidential candidate she might be.
Doris, do you think American newsrooms are even aware of this as a problem?
I think that there's a little bit of more heightened sensitivity to it, partially because I've seen in the comments threads that readers are coming in and saying that they don't want the same kind of coverage that they thought potentially doomed Hillary Clinton's campaign, that there was a lot of complaint about her being a shrill woman. And she was this groundbreaking female candidate in the United States, right? So that's what I'm seeing from readers saying, hey, media, pay attention and don't go down the same road that you went down in 2015 and 2016.
So as a result, what needs to be done at this stage to address the issue? What steps need to be taken by media outlets?
I think it's always important to get different people the opportunity to cover the candidates because they're going to bring different perspectives to the story. But also to think about if you're going to cover that somebody is berating their staff, then are you going to be looking at a male candidate in the same way and the way that he behaves around his staff? I think it's always good to think about whether you're covering different people with the same kind of lens. So as you look through the coverage of the Jeff Bezos divorce, which is a big business story, right? People frequently refer to his wife, Mackenzie, as just that, Jeff Bezos' wife, when she was a successful businesswoman in her own right and helped with the launch of Amazon. And so even when the divorce was announced, people still referred to her as Jeff Bezos' wife, even though her name had been in the news and people would have known who Mackenzie Bezos is. So there's a little bit of catering to search engines and trying to get these headline words that they think people are going to click on without necessarily thinking about people that they're covering in the news as individuals in their own right.
Doris, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, in the harsh Australian outback, a revolution is underway, the male-dominated sport of bull riding. Two women from Western Australia's Kimberley region have teamed up to break into the rodeo world, as Olivia Salazar-Winspear reports.
Thousands of miles from cowboy country, here in Western Australia, it's girls who rule the ranch. Instead of heading to the gym before work, Ruth Vogelsang is honing her rodeo skills, practicing on a horse before she takes the bull by the horns.
I've done a lot of, crazy adrenaline-fueled sports like bungee jumping or skydiving, but yeah, nothing compares to this.
Ruth's already competed in the novice event at the Mataranka Rodeo in the Northern Territory, although at the beginning her male peers didn't believe she was a serious contender.
I was the only girl there, and I think they thought I was the admin girl because they kept handing me their waiver forms and asking where they need to pay.
Camp drafting and rough riding sports have been popular for at least a century in Australia, but only a handful of women participate for the moment. Becky Klingenberg's a professional trick rider, and she decided to help coach her fellow rider, Ruth.
Because we've both got a semi-wild side and both got big goals, big dreams.
Bareback horse riding improves core strength and balance, but even experienced cowgirls take the odd tumble. The trick is learning to dust yourself off and get back in the saddle.
And finally, here's another role model for you in the world of STEM. Congratulations to the 29-year-old female computer scientist for helping to develop the algorithm that created the first ever image of a black hole. Katie Booman led development of a computer program that made the breakthrough image possible. It shows a halo of dust and gas some 500 million trillion kilometres away from Earth. And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that being, of course, France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.